Welcome to the PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. If you have been practicing clinically and seeing patients, it will come as no surprise to you that 75% of adults in America have a diagnosis of being overweight or obese. This is something that we're encountering day in and day out when it comes to our patients and our friends and our family. But how can we navigate these conversations about weight and lifestyle modifications and getting healthy and staying healthy with compassion? How can we identify our own biases around weight? And how can we make sure that these conversations are happening in a way that's really going to serve our patients well? I'd like to introduce you to Elena Sullivan. Elena is a specialist practicing obesity and behavioral and lifestyle medicine in Boston, and she is here to talk to us all about how we can meet patients where they are, and also with some friendly reminders about how we can improve our own health and make some lifestyle modifications so we can better serve our patients. Without further ado, here she is, Elena Sullivan. Elena, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
I would love it if you would take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners, tell us about you and your career.
Yeah, so my name is Elena Sullivan. This is my fourth year working as a PA in obesity and lifestyle medicine. I've always been very interested and passionate about preventative medicine and how to kind of get to the root cause of so many of the conditions we see on a daily basis in our clinical practices. I'm a big fan of the quote, treat the roots, not the fruits of obesity, because so much of what we do is dependent on the environmental, behavioral, genetic, lifestyle, other comorbid medical conditions that people have. And we really have to look at the whole picture to be able to treat someone holistically and as a whole person.
Yeah, I love that idea in life, like treat the roots, not the fruits. Like if I am struggling with something, that's not usually the source of the problem, right? That's the symptom. And the problem is that I am ignoring or not addressing or not doing something well, sort of deeper. Such an important reminder that we need to investigate for ourselves, but also for our patients, the why. Why is this happening? Not just this is happening, let's put a Band-Aid on it, but rather, why are you bleeding from here? What happened to make this problem? So let's talk a little bit about that whole person care. I think that is such a refreshing topic as clinicians. We live in this world where you're like, I do endocrine, so I don't do cardiac, so I don't do primary, so I don't, you're like, this is the organ system, this is the thing that I treat. But that's not how bodies work. We don't have different organ systems that don't interact with each other. So how can we focus on this longitudinal whole person care for the patients that are coming in to see us as soon as tomorrow?
I will say it is generally difficult in the medical system that we have built right now. Like you said, it is so fragmented and specialized that so many of the times the primary care, the PAs and Ps, physicians are the ones sort of gatekeeping where patients can go for specific services. And they're sort of trying to navigate all of this specialty care. And then you see the cardiologist for one thing, and they're going to prescribe something or send you to the nephrologist for something else. So it is very challenging, but I think it really starts with meeting the patient where they are and sort of figuring out what their biggest concern is at a given time. Like if someone's coming to you for a sick visit, but you're trying to initiate a conversation about weight loss, there's going to be a mismatch around what the goals and objectives are of that given visit. And you really need to meet the patient where they are so that they feel heard and listened to and actually get what they're most concerned about at a given time addressed. And I think it It's also very difficult in most medical settings because time is such a factor. I think one of the biggest um, barriers that clinicians report facing is limited time with their patients to be able to get the adequate history that they want and really have, and for patients as well to feel heard. It's really hard to get everything that you need out of a 15-minute visit. So it's a balance, I think, between asking questions and listening, and kind of touching on some of the factors that are contributing regarding, like, what are previous medical conditions like, what is family history like, what is the day-to-day stress like, or is someone sleeping, what is their timing and frequency of meals, are they able to get any movement in. So even if that happens over multiple visits and it's not just in one sort of session, those little bits of information that you can gain and take note of over time are going to help you better understand the patient as a whole and treat them effectively in the future.
Sure. So let's talk about something that you are incredibly passionate about, obesity, right? So how can we serve our obese patients better? I want to talk about something that I feel like is lurking in the back of the mind of everyone who is listening, which is this weight bias and the stigma that sort of swirls around when we have patients that are obese. And whether it's that we think that it's their fault, we think that, they're not trying, that they don't care, how can we address this? How can we identify our own bias and bring that to the front of our mind? I don't think we ever really get rid of these things, but bringing it to the forefront where we're saying, hey, I've identified that these are thoughts or things that I'm thinking about these particular patients. How can we take some steps towards doing that better?
hmm Yeah, so I mean, to start, 3 out of 4 adults in the US population has either overweight, otherwise known as pre-obesity, or obesity, right? So in any way, shape, or form, the odds of us treating and working with patients with either overweight or obesity is inevitable. And so, like you mentioned, it really starts about identifying our own bias about weight at the start of it, and then trying to really understand where that's coming from, whether it's, our upbringing, is it, cultural norms that we've grown up with around diet culture, media presentations, and really trying to understand first and foremost that obesity is now recognized as a disease or a chronic, progressive, relapsing, but treatable multifactorial condition that takes into account neurobehavioral factors, genetic factors, environmental factors, lifestyle factors, of course, but inherently obesity is not a lifestyle choice. And that's actually kind of the biggest message I want to get across, is that there are lifestyle factors that can improve or deteriorate the outcomes or progressive nature of obesity, but it's not inherently a fault of your own. And so many times I do a lot of work with patients around, like, telling them, okay, this is not your fault, right? If you look at, let's say both sides of your family, and every person on either side has been struggling with their weight for generations, this is not happening in a vacuum, right? Or if you live in a food desert and you don't have access to nutritious, healthy foods, or you've never been taught how to properly cook, or you're in an incredibly stressful job and you're always just kind of grabbing food on the go, or you don't have safe places to exercise or to engage in physical activity. So many of these factors are contributing to your weight. And it's not just like, oh, I couldn't stick to it. I couldn't do it. It's on me. And so many times I work with people who have gone through these cycles of yo-yo dieting and just feeling like, oh, it's not, I'm the problem. Maybe this next diet will be the cure. Maybe this is what's going to help me. But I always remind people that the dieting industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry for a reason, right? So if they were designed to succeed, then no one would be struggling with their weight. So we have to take into account all of these different factors when it comes to weight, and identifying too that, weight bias is kind of these ideas and attitudes that we have about people with overweight or obesity, and the stigmas, the stereotypes that we um, attribute to that bias, right? Thinking that people are lazy, or that they don't care about themselves, or are uneducated, which is not true in the slightest about any people. And you can't, unfortunately, with weight, it's one of the few chronic conditions left that is sort of socially acceptable to make fun of in popular media, in medicine, where we are no longer doing that for mental health like it once was about anxiety or depression or schizophrenia. So we still have a lot of work to do, but I think we're we're getting there, hopefully, through these types of conversations.
Yeah. When I think about that, I think about the fact that weight is so physically evident. So we can't look at someone and see that they have chronic kidney disease, right? We can't, unless they are jaundiced, we can't see that they have chronic liver disease or that they have a heart history, right? So when we're walking around in the world, or when a patient enters our exam room, or we see them being walked back by the staff so that we are going to see them next, it's very physically apparent. And I feel like that makes it so we have these thoughts. I will sometimes catch myself where a thought pops into your mind and you think, I didn't even know I thought that. Or it just sort of comes up and you think, well, that's not even necessarily how I think or feel, but it's because it's physically apparent, you have an immediate reaction. Do you have any tips for us for when we sort of catch ourselves thinking things that are in this weight bias stigma stereotype realm where we think them and then we think, well, that's not what I want to think. Is there anything we can do about those thoughts?
Hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm a big fan of kind of like little slogans or type things to remember that stick with patients or with clinicians. So one I always use is curious before furious. So sort of first identifying like, okay, where do I think this thought came from, right? Is it because of my upbringing? Is it because of all of the representations I see around weight and weight stigma and bias in the media? Do I actually think these things? Because at the end of the day, we all have thoughts, and we can decide which thoughts to follow and which thoughts to ignore or downplay. So this kind of also relates more to mindfulness, but just identifying, okay, these are the thoughts that I'm having. Now, how much value do I want to attribute to those thoughts? I don't want to just kind of ignore them and say, oh, that was a bad thought, I shouldn't be thinking that, but really starting to challenge where that form of thinking came from and how does it affect your clinical practice, right? Am I spending less time with my patient because I think that their trouble breathing is just related to their weight and they should just lose weight and that'll solve all of it, versus actually investigating further if there's something else going on? Because that is, so many studies have supported that clinicians are spending less time with patients with obesity or pre-obesity, or falsely attributing some of their medical conditions to their weight and not adequately digging deeper to find out what is going on. I see this a lot with sort of either musculoskeletal conditions with patients where it's like, oh, well, if you just lose weight, your knee will stop hurting. But then come to find out they have, a torn ACL that wasn't, thoroughly worked up. So there's so many different factors there to be thinking about.
If you're often freezing at work, you need Scrubmates, the insulating underscrub to treat your shivering. Like a bear hugger for providers, these underscrubs will keep you warm even in the coldest environments. Scrubmates offers a sleeveless option approved for the OR, as well as long-sleeved options for those who work elsewhere. They even have a patent-pending pocket for your valuables. No more tying your rings to your scrub drawstrings. Life is too short to have goosebumps all day. A PA-founded company, Scrubmates is on a quest to make your day more comfortable with super soft, functional, and affordable scrubs and underscrubs. Head to wearscrubmates.com to fight the hospital freeze. I do see and feel clinicians seeing obesity as the most obvious smoking gun, right? We know it exists. We know it's incredibly prevalent, as you've said, and we know that it affects all these other organ systems, factors, things, but it's not. As with all things in medicine, it's very rarely one single factor leading to one single outcome. So sure, maybe the obesity is contributing to your osteoarthritis, but it's not the single thing that causes knee pain, right? We know that. Otherwise, there would be no one who wasn't obese who had pain in their knees. And we know that that is not true. So we sort of fall into this trap of thinking this exists, therefore it must cause this other thing. When it's like, this exists, maybe it's a factor leading to this thing that we're talking about.
Yep. Same with obesity as well, of like, this is something that exists, but it's not just due to poor nutrition choices or at all with nutrition. I've patients who have like excellent nutrition and struggle to lose weight. And there's so many other factors looking in the background. So we can't just, assume or make judgments about it due to this one single factor, as you mentioned.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had an experience where I was the patient being seen by someone, and they were making some lifestyle modification recommendations for me. And this clinician said to me, I think it would be good if you ate a plant based diet. And I was fine with this recommendation. I didn't have context for like what we're trying to address and why a plant-based diet would help that, which I think would have helped me to be more accepting of this recommendation. And then this provider said to me, "Do you have young kids?" And I said, "Yeah, a whole lot of them, like 5 specifically." And she said, "Oh, it would be really hard for you to change your lifestyle then." And I felt like, well, I mean, maybe, but also maybe not. Like maybe those kids are the motivation that I need to solve this problem that I'm having. Or, unbeknownst to her, we were vegan for a period of time. So I actually don't think switching to a plant-based diet would be hard for me at all. I think I have a lot of resources and tools available to me, and that our kids would be maybe not enthused about this change, but like on board with the fact that like, hey, we're going to make some changes. But I felt immediately like, well, first of all, she's discounting my ability to do the things she's asking me to do because of something she's judging me on. And second of all, you know, without asking questions, without being curious about, hey, have you ever thought about this? Like, have you ever gone for a period of time without meat or animal products? Like, what do you think that would look like for your life? Do you have barriers? She took a quick look at my life and said, I have identified your barriers and I know why you won't do this. And I think we should move on to medical management. And the whole thing, I was like, what just happened here? Like what? So how can we not do that for our patients and give them the opportunity to say, hey, you tell me your barriers. You tell me if you think this would work for you or what you're dealing with in your life.
Yes, I think motivational interviewing is single-handedly one of the best tools that we can have as clinicians or can be trained to do to really ask about, okay, what's important to you? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely do you think you are to be able to make this change? Or is there any modification that you think you can make kind of, instead of kind of the all or nothing that we're very much used to of like, well, I'm either, eating a lot of animal products or going on a 100% vegan plant-based diet. Okay, well, what would like one meatless meal a week look like for you? What are the types of foods that you like to eat? So you can really meet someone where they are and sort of start there and move forward. So, for instance, like when I work with patients, the first thing I always start with is breakfast. So, what do you typically eat for breakfast? Before I sway anyone any which way, I want to see what's going on first, so that we can kind of figure out. Okay, what are some of the amazing things that you're doing? Like, great, you're getting some fruit in the morning, wonderful. Okay, maybe you need a little bit more protein. How can we add that? What are the things? What kinds of sources of protein do you like to eat? So it really comes down to like what is already working for the patient, and then trying to build on that. Because so much of the time, especially with weight shaming does not work. It often leads people to start talking to me because they are coming from such a negative place. But you can't hate yourself into loving yourself. You really have to start with trying to feel good about yourself and then go from there and think, oh wow, you know what? I added, you know, an extra color to my plate today in terms of a colorful vegetable that I tried. Or I tried it and I didn't like it, but you know what? I tried it. And you could build from there as opposed to thinking, oh no, like I'm such a failure. I didn't, get 100% of my goal in for today. What's the point, right? I'm like, I might as well just quit like while I'm up. I might as well go back to what I was doing before, right? Where we really want to focus on those small wins and then amplify them as we go.
That is so important. And I think that motivational interviewing is something that we hear about a lot. And most of us are probably like, yeah, that would be good. But I don't really, I haven't learned it or I haven't integrated it into my practice. But that is applicable to any specialty, right? You have someone getting ready for surgery and you want them to do certain things before, it's tangible in every aspect of patient care, that exists and that we can have those conversations in a way where we really are identifying like, hey, how do you feel about this? Why would you do it? Why would you want to do it? Why is this important to you? And then having some follow up with, how's it going? I think as providers, we often miss the piece of how's it going. We say, oh, you want to lose weight or you want to be healthier, or you want to be able to keep up with your kids, try to change your diet and lifestyle. And then the next time we see them, we say, how are you? How's your diabetes? But we don't say, hey, last time I saw you, you said you were going to focus on these things. How's it going? Are you doing that? Or, to be that accountability partner that that person needs on their journey.
Particularly with non-scale victories, I find, because the patient may come back to you and they may not have lost any weight, but maybe they're really transitioning and making really healthful choices in their diet, or they started walking every day, or maybe they started strength training and they even went up in weight initially, because that's also completely normal. So really not making it all just about the scale or weight, but really about what are the behavioral changes that are going to get there. Because the scale is just, it's kind of like looking at the scoreboard, expecting your team to win and just focusing on that versus all of the plays that need to happen to get your team to the finish line. So the behavioral piece is that bulk of it, what actually gets to that outcome.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that behavior a little. I think there's a couple of different ways to approach this in terms of mindfulness and eating, both for us talking to our patients, but also for us as clinicians who are running to the next patient who has a visit and we're running behind and we have to chart and go to the bathroom and also eat. So what is mindful eating? How is that different than the way that we're typically mindlessly in a hurry consuming food?
Yeah. So mindful eating is really about being present in the moment. And I always sort of frame it around this question of what am I feeling and what do I need? Right. And I always differentiate it between physical and emotional hunger. There are plenty of reasons why we eat. We feel like our stomach is grumbling. Maybe it's that time to eat. It's been a few hours since we've eaten. And then there's all the emotional reasons, right? Maybe we're bored, we're tired, we're lonely, we had a stressful day. And being able to first differentiate between those two is really important, because so many of the times we're sort of on this autopilot. I always think of it like when we go to the movies and we eat popcorn, we're like, the movie is playing, we're watching, and our hands and mouth are just doing something else. And next thing you know, it's like, wait, where'd all that popcorn go? I wasn't really fully aware. Or maybe that first bite we were aware of, but not all of the subsequent bites. So mindfulness is really about taking a moment to kind of ground yourself and ask yourself, like, what do I need? And that can be about the setting that we're eating in. Like, are we eating at our desk, like between patients, and not, just focusing on our screen and typing and not even just like kind of looking or tasting our food? Um, are we mindful of like how much food we need to eat, and when do we start to feel full? Generally, it takes like roughly 15 to 20 minutes for your brain to register that you're full after eating. So if we're fast eaters or we're just kind of going through the motions, next thing you know, we might be feeling overly full or uncomfortably full after eating. So as clinicians, it's just as important to try to practice what we preach when we can. We're not perfect by any means, but we're also notorious for not taking good care of ourselves in so many ways due to our busy lifestyles. So really taking those moments to take a step back and think, okay, what is, nourishing me right now in this moment? What can I do to kind of support myself and to support my patients and give them these little tips and tricks, like bringing, a snack and keeping them in your car, in your backpack, in your office, etc., just to kind of get you over that hump if you're really hungry in the moment, things like that.
Yeah. So I would like to sort of use that as an opportunity to talk about to the clinician who's listening, who may feel like they're sacrificing their own mental, physical health for the mental and physical health of their patients, for the good of the practice, for the needs of the hospital. How can that person take a little pause and be reminded that our health matters because we have to be healthy and well to take care of everyone else, to get them healthy and well, whether that's patients or family members. So, what are some tips that you have for us as a clinician to remember that that's important and also integrate some of those healthy choices?
Yeah, as you said, our ability to care for everyone else in our life is augmented by our abilities to care for ourselves first and foremost. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you have nothing left to give or your battery is on empty, you're not going to be able to be there for your spouse or your children or your friends or your patients, etc. So if another sort of quote or saying that I really like is, if you don't make time for your wellness, then you'll be forced to make time for your illness. So really trying to prioritize those preventative things, which is so hard in the landscape of particularly medicine, where we treat, there's an issue, we treat it and we move on, right? And especially when we're seeing so many patients in such a short period of time, we're really trying to take a step back and say, okay, what do I need to really nourish my mind, my body, um, and make me feel like I'm able to kind of continue caring for everyone else. So this can be taking, when possible, like a break to eat meals distraction free, and really making the effort to take that break for lunch as opposed to working through lunch or finishing notes. So even if that's a short period of time, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's not the ideal, really mindful, slow eating meal that you like, but it will make a difference. Maybe it's getting in some movement. So for instance, if you've got a little break during the day, going on a quick walk outdoors, getting some sun, getting some fresh air. I'm a big proponent of what are called, like, I call exercise snacks. So this idea of, like, we think of food snacks like, oh, I'm going to go get something to recharge. But like a little exercise snack is maybe getting up between patients. Maybe it's doing 2 squats or some jumping jacks, or getting yourself like a little bit of energy into your body, and breaking up that sedentary time that we otherwise spend at the computer, seeing patients or being seated. So that sometimes is a fun way of like, okay, this is my self-care. I'm only taking 30 seconds to a minute to do this, but it's going to make a difference throughout the day. Setting boundaries is another big thing of, okay, I'm not going to answer emails, after a certain time in the evening. I am going to turn off my notifications so that I'm not tempted to read them, or right before bed, or, first thing in the morning before I do the things that I need to do for myself. So when we can start to lead by example and start to say, like, okay, I'm doing this for myself, like, you can do this too. That can also be a powerful tool in your exchange and interaction with patients to say, have you ever thought about this? Or would you be open to trying this to, make that time for yourself?
Have you ever wondered if your malpractice policy is providing you with enough coverage? Turns out that employers' policies protect their interests and not necessarily yours. CM&F Group offers personal liability protection that adapts to your growing, changing responsibilities, including state compacts and allowing for protection for practicing medicine across state lines. From telemedicine to license and HIPAA defense, if it's something that you need protection for, CM&F has you covered. PA students can even enjoy a completely free student policy from your first day as a student until you become a licensed PAC. In a climate where we are hyper aware of charting, wording, covering ourselves, and constantly worried about practicing defensive medicine, you can't leave your liability coverage up to chance. Enjoy the peace of mind, exceptional customer service, and find the best comprehensive coverage that fits your practice at www.cmfgroup.com/the PA is in, or click the link in the show notes. Even as you're saying that, I've worked a lot on boundaries in the last couple of years, because I felt like, because I was called to take care of patients, because I was called to work in medicine, I had to have poor boundaries. I thought my work had to come first. I thought I had to chart at home, had to be emailing in the evening, that I had this societal obligation, which was really self-imposed, that I needed to put everyone else's needs above my own. So I would like to wrap this conversation up with something that you said when we were sort of prepping for this interview, which is the biggest weight that we can lose is the weight of other people's opinions or our own self-criticism. Talk to me about how that has manifested in your life and how we can sort of get rid of what I call OPO, other people's opinions, and that weight.
Yeah, so that's a big one, because a lot of times patients and clinicians alike come with sort of these ideas of, oh, I need to be a certain way, or so and so is going to think this of me if I don't do this correctly, or commonly call these self-limiting beliefs of, like, well, if I, for instance, don't go to the gym for an hour, then I might as well not go at all. What's the point, kind of thing. But trying to poke holes into that and start to change the way that you're thinking about things. So instead of saying, like, well, I failed, or I didn't do it, or I didn't complete this goal, saying, like, okay, well, I've failed, or I didn't reach my goal in the past, but now I'm learning, I'm going to improve. Sort of trying to poke holes in those, like, all or nothing ideas that we have. And so by also meeting yourself where you are and sort of trying to combat those automatic negative thoughts, a lot of the time, it's like you're just used to thinking, well, you know what, I didn't do this right, or I failed, or I'm never going to be able to do this because I didn't do it before. Starting to combat that with those little episodes of, like, those small wins that you've identified or noticed, like, oh wow, okay, I ate 3 meals today instead of skipping 2 of them, or I didn't have an episode of overeating late at night and I went to bed instead, or I drank some tea. Those are the small things that are going to start to say, you know what, regardless of what anyone else says, I need to be my own biggest advocate and say, you know what, you're doing a great job, or you're doing the best that you can. it can be really hard to do in the moment for many people, both clinicians, I think, and patients. But as clinicians, if you can give your patients that sense of accomplishment and that sense of like, you know what, you're doing a really good job, or I'm really proud of you, or you made these changes and you're gonna, or you've had a tough week and that's okay. Let's go back to basics and take it from there and move forward. Because at the end of the day, you are like the most important like project that you're ever going to be working on. And so all of those other things in your life are going to be secondary to like your own health and well-being. As hard as that is to kind of put yourself first, it's a continuous learning experience and process. But as we remind ourselves of that each day, even when it's difficult, the easier it's going to get over time until that becomes kind of automatic. And you can sort of let go of, okay, well, instead of, what other people think about me is going to become less and less important if I'm coming from a place of feeling really good and positively about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the times in my life when I have most valued other people's opinions were these seasons when I didn't trust my own opinion, or I wasn't taking the time to really cultivate thoughts about myself that were intentional. Like what you're saying, I'm like, oh, that sounds great. When I was super burned out, and I think part of that burnout was trying to keep up on a treadmill that someone else was setting the speed of, I was trying to keep up with other people's opinions and expectations of me, which is a fickle target, right? I can't control what they think or what they expect. And then to try to keep up with that, I had left behind the intentionality of, well, how do I think I'm doing? And what do I think is important? And what do I value? So I was chasing someone else's expectations and opinions, which is exhausting. And there's no end to this, quest for what other people think about us. And also, I have found that oftentimes other people aren't thinking about you, that we that we think everyone's worried about us, and if we close our laptop and go home, they're going to know that we, like built a boundary and started to be healthier, better, more well-balanced humans. And mostly they're worried about their laptop and their work and their life, and they're not really spending that much time thinking about us in the first place.
Yeah, it's like running a marathon and having like the finish line to be pushed. But like that idea of perfectionism and that we have to, meet these markers to, achieve that goal, it is not real. Like we have to sort of meet ourselves where we are and figure out the things that we are doing well and go from there and be, confident and happy with the things that we are doing really well, as opposed to focusing more on that like negative shame. Like people always do best when they are focusing on the things that make them feel good as opposed to the things that feel bad. We don't want to get caught in these shame spirals going, around and around and around, because it's really hard to get out. We're never going to be enough if we're always seeking for that sense of perfection versus meeting ourselves where we are and looking backwards and thinking of all the things that we did successfully.
Yeah, I find the other thing about other people's opinions is that sometimes they surprise you. So sometimes we make a choice expecting judgment and objections, and for people to react very negatively to this thing where, I'm going to build a boundary with work. We'll use like the laptop example. I'm not going to take my laptop home. I'm going to complete my charting. I'm going to be diligent about this. I'm going to ask to see less patients because I need more time to get my notes done. I'm going to, stand up for myself and do this thing. And we're expecting everyone else to say like, how dare she? Like so rude and presumptuous. And other people are like, oh, I would also like that. Like I commend you. I'm proud of you for doing that. Like, can we get on board with this for the entire group? And that would be better for everyone if we had a culture of not bringing work home. That would be better for everyone if we had dedicated admin time to get our notes done and to, see patients and have enough time to spend with them. And you think it's going to be everyone is objecting, and everyone's like, oh, I'm on board with this. Like sometimes we build it up in our mind to be this battle that has not yet existed. Like no one has even objected, and we're talking ourselves out of asking for the thing because we're worried they might object. Like it's just
I always sort of try to frame it on like, what's the worst that can happen, right? If like you prepare yourself for that worst case scenario, you're like, okay, actually, that's okay. The worst that they say is no, but the best case scenario is all of these other things that could happen. Then, what's the point of trying? Like if you limit your beliefs to that, like, I'm not going to try because like I don't want to face rejection, then you're guaranteeing the limited outcomes that are going to come out of that. So I think the main message too is just try and sort of envision more and see what happens, because the odds are it's going to work out for you. And if it doesn't, then you can kind of reassess and move from there or try again. Like, just because you face one roadblock doesn't mean you can't go around it.
Yeah, I always say a no is just a not yet, or not yes to the question that you asked. Like, what other questions can we ask? How can we ask them differently in a way that really meets the person that we're talking to, and maybe even solves a problem of theirs while solving a problem of ours? Well, Elena, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like we have had so much good conversation in terms of meeting our patients where they're at and just really investigating what's going on with them, but also turning that curiosity on ourselves and saying, hey, how am I doing with this health and wellness? Am I in a position where I really feel like I am leaning into what's good for me and what's going to be good for the things that I value down the road? So if people are like, I need more of Elena in my life, where can they go to find you and connect with you, follow and keep up with all the things that you are doing?
People can find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is linkedin.com/Elena Sullivan. And I usually like to post some tidbits about mindfulness or lifestyle medicine there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy day to join us today.
Thank you so much, Tracy.
I am a huge fan of any conversation that reminds us about the importance of boundaries and self-care and figuring out what we need in order to serve our patients well. It's also such an important reminder to know that the narrative has changed. It's no longer us telling patients what to do, but rather us as clinicians saying, hey, we're human too. We're on the same level as you. How can we work together to get you to a state of health and wellness that feels good for you, that is reasonable and sustainable given your life and your job and your stress and your season of living in community with other people? Thank you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of The PA is In. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.